The year 1756 marked the dawn of a tumultuous era in European history, the 7 Years' War. The British Prime Minister, the Duke of Newcastle, was optimistic that the newly formed alliances could avert a widespread conflict. However, the winds of war were already blowing. France launched a formidable attack on the British-held island of Minorca in the Mediterranean, setting the stage for a cascade of events that would shape the course of history. Admiral John Byng, in an attempt to relieve Minorca, faced a daunting challenge against a superior French force. Despite his best efforts, the British attempt failed, leading to the capture of the island on the 28th of June. In the aftermath of this bitter defeat, Admiral Byng faced a court-martial and tragically was executed for his perceived failure. The formal declaration of war on France by Britain came on May 17, 1756, almost 2 years after hostilities had already erupted in the Ohio country. Across the continent in the Kingdom of Prussia, the formidable King Frederick II, also known as Frederick the Great, had been keenly observing the clashes in North America. Recognizing the strategic importance of forming strong alliances, he forged a powerful bond with Great Britain, realizing that their united efforts would be crucial in the upcoming conflict. On August 29, 1756, Frederick took a bold step, leading Prussian troops across the border of Saxony, one of the smaller German states allied with Austria. His intentions were clear: to preempt an anticipated Austro-French invasion of Silesia, a region that has been a focal point in past conflicts. Frederick's grand strategy was meticulously planned with 3 distinct goals in mind. Firstly, he aimed to seize control of Saxony, effectively neutralizing it as a potential threat to Prussia, while utilizing its resources to aid Prussian war efforts. Secondly, he sought to advance into Bohemia, securing winter quarters for his forces at Austria's expense, thereby exerting financial strain on his enemies. Lastly, Frederick intended to invade Moravia from Silesia, capturing the strategic important fortress at Olmütz, then proceeding to Vienna, forcing an end to the war on favorable terms. The Prussian king divided his forces into 3 columns. Prince Ferdinand of Brunswick commanded a column of 15,000 troops directed to close in on the town of Chemnitz. The Duke of Brunswick-Bevern led another corps of 18,000 soldiers advancing towards Bautzen. Meanwhile, Frederick himself marched at the center, commanding a formidable corps of 30,000 troops. Together, they set their sights on the majestic city of Dresden. The Saxon and Austrian forces were caught off guard and leaving Dresden vulnerable to Frederick's rapid advance. With little opposition, the Prussian army occupied the city, securing a significant victory. The Saxon army assumed a strong defensive position near Pirna, forcing Frederick to isolate and attempt to starve them into surrender. Meanwhile, he aimed to establish a winter base in the fertile Bohemian plain, necessitating a challenging journey through the rough terrain of northern Bohemia. On the opposing side, an Austrian army led by Field Marshal von Braun planned a rescue mission to aid the Saxon army's escape across the River Elbe and join their allies. The rendezvous was set for the night of the 11th to the 12th of September. With both sides preparing for a showdown, the Prussian army advanced through the Nettel-Jebrich mountains towards the Bohemian plain, unknowingly marching into a well-prepared Austrian trap. Braun, having received intelligence of the Prussians' likely exit point at Lobositz, moved swiftly with his forces to ambush Frederick's army. The Austrian forces, under the command of Field Marshal Braun, skillfully positioned themselves on an extinct volcano above Lobositz. The advantageous terrain allowed them to deploy their battalions from Croatia among the walled vineyards that covered the lower flank of the hill. To add to their strength, they were supported by 7,800 regular infantry led by Franz Moritz from Lacy, who remained hidden on the eastern side of the mountain. The Austrians further concealed their strength by setting up a relatively small force of cavalry and grenadier battalions as bait in front of the town, while behind them more irregular troops and grenadiers lay in ambush, backed by a reserve brigade of cuirassiers. As the Prussian troops advanced, they marched in a column of rout, completely unaware that they were walking straight into a well-prepared trap. The Austrian irregulars on the Lobisch mountain began to open fire on the Prussians, prompting Frederick to dispatch the Duke of Brunswick-Bevern with 7 battalions of infantry to push them back. The center of the Prussian position, located between the Lobosch and Offsau mountain, was dominated by a low spur known as the Homolka. The few irregulars defending this position were quickly chased away by the advancing Prussian infantry, who then positioned a battery of heavy artillery on the Homolka to respond to any threat. As the morning mist lifted and the sun rose, the Prussians noticed what seemed to be a small cavalry rearguard in the plain below Lobositz. Frederick and his staff mistakenly believed that Browne was in a retreat and had left only this small force behind. Consequently, Frederick ordered a limited cavalry charge to chase away the supposed rearguard led by Lieutenant General Kau. Around 1,200 Prussian cuirassiers charged at the Austrian horsemen and initially drove them back towards the Elbe River. However, the Prussian cavalry encountered unexpected resistance from hidden Austrian artillery and infantry, which led to a counterattack by the Austrian cuirassiers, forcing the Prussians to retreat. The failure of the Prussian cavalry charges was a big blow to their morale. They realized they were up against the entire Austrian army, strategically positioned on both sides of Lobositz. The fight on the Lobosch Mountains, which was supposed to be a weaker position, was actually held strongly by the Austrians. The Duke of Bevern, the Prussian commander, tried to remove the from the Sace's troops, who kept reinforcing their positions. Realizing how serious the situation was, Frederick retreated to the village of Ruschitz, leaving Bevern and Prince Ferdinand of Brunswick in charge. The Prussians regrouped, and Bevern decided to intensify their efforts on the Lobosch mountain. He brought in more troops from the center and led charges to drive away the Austrians. Meanwhile, Browne's forces safely withdrew through Lobositz and over the Morellenberg. The Battle of Lobositz, though Frederick claimed it as a victory by the standards of the time, really marked the start of a long and intensive conflict in the 7 Years' War. It showed the resilience and the tactical skill of both Prussian and Austrian forces. After Lobositz, Browne had achieved his objectives of stopping Frederick's advance, covering the crossing of the Elbe and rescuing the Saxon army, and securing Bohemia. Despite Frederick's claim of victory, it was clear that Browne had strategically succeeded, with Austria strategically well placed for the events of 1757, and the 7 Years' War had officially begun.